I yield the balance of my time, and I now recognize the ranking member for the Subcommittee on Border Security and Enforcement, the gentleman from California, Mr. Correa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Want to thank our witnesses for being here today. Your stories are important because we need to take them into consideration as we make policy, not just immigration policy, not just border policy, but policy that's best for the United States of America. Preparing for this committee hearing on border security, and over the last few months, I thought back of what this country's about, what immigrants are about, what refugees are about, and I sat there and I thought and remembered some of the stories my mom, God rest her soul, would tell me about my grandfather when we came to this country, 1890s. Got a fact check, but she said Grandpa paid 2 cents to walk across the border. And one of those walks almost cost him his life. The border has been changing, but it always seems to be a very treacherous place. It shouldn't be, but it is. And today we talk about the cost of the border, but we really talk about, again, drug policy, economic policy, immigration policy, refugee policy, all rolled into one. And that's why your stories today are going to be so important, so they're not forgotten. You know, when I first took this position in this committee in January as ranking member of this committee, I made it my mission to go to every major border crossing in the southern border to talk to the men and women in green and blue uniforms to find out what they were seeing. You can't know what's going on here in Washington, D.C. unless you go there and you talk to the men and women where the boots are actually worn and what they're seeing. And I'll tell you, I found out that every one of those border crossings has a different personality. Every one of those border crossings, every state has a different set of challenges. And that was right after COVID was over, right about the time Title 42 was about to be lifted. And that was, if I can bring you back a little bit in history, those were the days that we were all predicting chaos at the border. Title 42 lifted, it is going to be chaotic. So about a week before Title 42 was about to be lifted, I went to San Ysidro, our biggest border crossing in terms of population in this country and probably the world. Myself and our border port chief there, we drove to Mexico, to Tijuana, to meet with the stakeholders in Mexico. They called for the meeting and said, we don't want chaos at the border. We met with federal, state, local businessmen and women in Mexico. Same message, we want order at the border. And it's obvious because there's a lot of commerce, a lot of lives, a lot of jobs, a lot at stake. And all of us were kind of hunkering down, getting ready for the worst scenario. And the next day, the next week, nothing really materialized. We just had Secretary Mayorkas speak to us in the Judiciary Committee, and preparation for his committee hearing and his testimony, I delved in a little bit into what his policies were. His policies pissed off both sides of the aisle, I think. On one side, he put in, punitive measures. Title VIII, you break the law, walk in between ports of entry, you got the law to deal with. On the other side is he created pathways, using legal pathways existing now, which are essentially parole, to give the opportunity for individuals to come into the U.S. Carrot and the stick. And the other thing he did is he worked with our allies around the world, Latin America, to address this issue. I have a little chart here, the other one if I can, that shows the burden of refugees around the world and where it's distributed. Surprisingly, Colombia's got right now home to about 3 million Venezuelan refugees. Mexico doesn't appear, does it, down here, but says 500,000. I think it's way over that. What I'm trying to say, ladies and gentlemen, is today, the challenge of refugees, immigration, economic growth, fentanyl, the tragedies at the border are an even bigger challenge that are going to ask us as policymakers to step up and come up with some good public policy. China, okay, post-COVID-19, the world is in economic recession. Even China, okay, is sputtering. 20% unemployment rate for the young people. So imagine you're going to continue to see people coming across the border that are young people of working age going through your area. So the challenge is for us as policymakers to figure this whole thing out. We have 12 million undocumented workers in the United States today, 10 million jobs that are going wanting. Employers need workers. In my district, a few weeks ago, I went to visit a manufacturer who was now manufacturing more than ever because of some jobs they brought back from China, some electric connectors that they were building. And he said, Lou, I need more workers, but I can't. I have a choice. Expand my business, bring more jobs back to the U.S. If I do that, he says, I will be breaking the law, or I can just not fulfill the orders the U.S. government is asking me to fulfill. Immigration policy, refugee policy, and of course, the big one that all of us feel at home is fentanyl, drugs. I don't think there's anybody here that hasn't felt the scourge, has heard the death stories in their neighborhoods, in their communities from fentanyl. Mr. Chairman, I hope we drill down and get some good information today that'll lead us to some good public policy, because at the end of the day, it's not about the Chinese, it's not about the Colombians, it's not about the Mexicans or the Canadians, it's about the United States of America implementing good immigration policy that'll lead to strong economic growth to keep us as the greatest country in the world. So I do hope to hear the testimony today and work with all of you to make sure we come up with good, sound public policy for America. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you, Ranking Member Correa. I now recognize the chairman for the Subcommittee on Counterterrorism, Law Enforcement, and Intelligence, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Pfluger, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Higgins. And good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to the joint hearing on the Subcommittee of Border Security Enforcement and the Subcommittee on Counterterrorism, Law Enforcement, and